Namaskaram. Hi, Michael. Hi, Ernesto. Today we have a question that says, the qualities that flow naturally from self-inquiry are truly pure qualities, and therefore it makes no sense to try to modify our behavior to be more compassionate, humble, helpful. If these qualities weren't yet the result of attending to ourselves for who we really are, then they would not be authentic qualities. Is this true?
Not quite. That is, to the extent to which we practice self-investigation, our vasanas are thereby weakened and ego subsides, so we naturally become humble. And because of the weakening of our Vishaya vasanas, we become less selfish. So we altogether become a better person. From the external appearance, we will appear to be a better person as a result of self-investigation. This doesn't mean that we can neglect our behavior. That is, if our attention is wholly focused on ourselves, then we need not be concerned about our behavior at all. But in practice, most of us, our attention is fixed on ourselves, at best only some of the day. Much of the day, our attention is going outwards. We're engaged in action. So long as we are allowing our attention to go away from ourselves, our behavior does matter, because how we behave, it's under the sway of our vasanas. That is, in this context, it's very important to understand what Bhagavan teaches us in the 19th paragraph of Nana. I'll just read the meaning. He says, there are not two minds, namely a good mind and a bad mind. There are not two minds in this context means there are not two kinds of minds. It's not that some minds are good and some minds are bad. Mind is only one. When he says mind is only one, he means mind is, all minds are the same. Well, we can interpret it in other ways. We can take it very literally, but there's only one mind. But that in this context, that's not what he means. Here he means all minds are essentially the same. Then he goes on to say, only vasanas are of two kinds, namely subha and asubha. Subha means what is agreeable, virtuous, or good. Asubha means what's disagreeable, wicked, harmful, or bad. So there are two kinds of vasanas. And even these two kinds of vasanas, we need to understand, this is for simplicity, but Bhagavan said there are two kinds of vasanas. In fact, whether a vasana is a relatively good vasana or a relatively bad vasana, it's not that some vasanas are either good or bad. It's a spectrum. Some vasanas are much worse. Some are not quite so bad. Some are even a little better. Some are good. Some are still better. So it's a range from subha to asubha. There's a whole range in between. So ultimately, all vasanas but take our attention away from ourselves. In other words, all Vishaya vasanas are bad. But relatively speaking, among those Vishaya vasanas, some can be classified as subha to a greater or lesser extent, and some can be classified as asubha to a greater or lesser extent. Then he goes on to say, when the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, it is said to be a good mind. And when it is under the sway of asubha vasanas, a bad mind. So what do we have to infer from this? That is, why do we say some people are good and some people are bad? Because of this, it depends on the vasanas. But how can we know whether someone else is under the sway of good vasanas or bad vasanas? It's only from their behavior we can infer that. So if a person is always angry and always concerned only about themselves and not at all concerned about someone else, that behavior leads us to suppose that their mind is under the sway of asubha vasanas. So the implication here is, depending on the type of vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by, that is, the vasanas will affect our behavior. If we allow ourselves to be swayed by asubha vasanas, we'll behave in a bad way, selfish and concerned only about ourselves, not concerned about others. Whereas if we allow ourselves to be swayed by subha vasanas, we'll be naturally a better person. We'll be more kind and caring and considerate. So we don't have to be so concerned about our behavior. What we need to be concerned about is what type of vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. Best not to allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana other than sat vasana. The only vasana that is a wholly good vasana is sat vasana. Sat vasana means the inclination just to be, or the inclination to attend only to our being. Sat means being, vasana means inclination. So that liking to attend only to our being, only to I am, and thereby to be as we actually are, that is the only truly good vasana. That is sat vasana. All other vasanas are vishaya vasanas, which can be classified as subha to a greater or lesser extent, or asubha to a greater or lesser extent. So it's best not to allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, any vishaya vasana at all, only to be swayed by sat vasana. That is best. But because our mind is still relatively impure, we are still being frequently swayed by our vasanas. When we are by our vishaya vasanas, that is, when we are being swayed by our vishaya vasanas, we should, even if we can't avoid being swayed by the better vasanas, we should at least avoid being swayed by the worst vasanas. We shouldn't say, oh, all vishaya vasanas are equal. So if I'm going to be swayed by vishaya vasanas, I can do whatever I like. I can be selfish and everything. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter, because if we allow asubha vasanas to sway us, that shows how little ability we have to refrain from being swayed by our vasanas. So it is better to, so long as we're being swayed by vasanas, we should try to avoid being swayed by asubha vasanas and to be swayed only by subha vasanas. If we're swayed by subha vasanas, that will naturally reflect in our behavior. If we're swayed by asubha vasanas, that will naturally reflect in our behavior. So it's at the level of vasanas, but we need to be concerned about our behavior. If we avoid being swayed by the asubha vasanas, our behavior will naturally be better. If we allow ourselves to be swayed by asubha vasanas, then our behavior will be bad. So it's not the wording of this question. It makes no sense to try and modify our behavior to be more compassionate, humble, helpful. It does make sense. That is, we should be concerned about our behavior because our behavior is reflecting the vasanas. But rather than waiting till the vasanas have sprouted and thereby are influencing our behavior, we should try to be not to be swayed by the vasana at a much earlier level. That is, as soon as an asubha vasana rises in our mind, as soon as there's a feeling of jealousy or anger or dislike of people, or I can't be bothered, I don't care, as soon as such vasanas begin to rise, we should check them. We should not allow our mind to be swayed by such vasanas. It's much better to be swayed by vasanas of being caring and kind and tolerating other people, because there are all sorts of people in the world. There are people who seem to be good and seem to be bad because of the vasanas they're under the sway of. So if we see someone from their behavior, but they're under the sway of impure vasanas, we should, or they're under the sway of asubha vasanas, we should feel sorry for them because they were suffering thereby. So our concern should be, because the aim of in the spiritual path, before we can eradicate ego, we need to purify the mind to a considerable extent, because the impurities in the mind are the Vishaya Vasanas. So long as our Vishaya Vasanas are strong, we will not be willing to surrender ourselves. We'll not be willing to turn our attention back within and hold on to self-attentiveness. So purification is essential. The most effective way to purify us, the mind, is by practicing self-investigation, because this is when we are holding on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by the Vishaya Vasanas. And Vishaya Vasanas are strengthened when we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. They're weakened when we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So the key to good behavior, the most effective way to improve our behavior is to practice self-investigation. But when our attention is going outwards, we even then we need to keep a check on our behavior by keeping a check on the vasanas. That is constantly, moment to moment, so many vasanas are rising in our mind. As Bhagavan says in the 10th paragraph, though the vasanas rise in countless numbers like ocean waves, that is constantly vasanas are rising in our mind, and vasanas are pulling us in all sorts of directions. So we need to, so long as we're being swayed by vasanas, we should at least avoid being swayed by the asubha vasanas. It's better not to be swayed by any vasanas at all. But if we have to be swayed by vasanas, better to be swayed by the subha vasanas rather than the asubha vasanas. And that will reflect in our behavior. So since our behavior arises out of our vasanas, to be more precise, it arises out of our allowing ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas. Our behavior is important. We shouldn't neglect our behavior and think, oh, I can behave anyhow I like. I can be as selfish and as mean as uncaring as I like. We'd be fooling ourselves. That's not practical. So long as we're unable to avoid being swayed by asubha vasanas, we won't even begin to be able to practice self-investigation. So it's important, but we even when we're being swayed by vasanas, but we are keeping a check on what vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. We should, if at all we are swayed by vasanas, it's better to be swayed by the subha vasanas than the asubha vasanas. Is that a clear answer?
Yes. Very clear.
And Michael, vasanas, talking about vasanas, so could we compare vasanas with a plant? Like, I mean, you compare with the seeds, no? They are the seeds,
yes,
of our will. So,
yes.
So the seed of a plant is under the soil. We don't see it. Only we see when it sprouts and it passes through the soil, and you see the So in that sense,
but these are the seeds in this case are on the surface. That is, some of the vasanas we may not be aware of, certain vasanas within ourselves, but a lot of our vasanas we're very clearly aware of because they're sprouting all the time. So we are aware of it. We shouldn't think that we're not aware of our vasanas. Okay, in a sense, yes, to be very precise, we're not aware of the vasanas till they sprout. It's like saying I wasn't aware of this wave until it rose up from the ocean.
Exactly, that's the meaning. We know our vasanas, and maybe some we don't. But we know our vasanas, but only when the tendency, the inclination rises, and we are.
But here is like Carlos. Here is like the animals when the earthquake, before the earthquake begins, some animals begin to run, no?
Yes.
And when we develop the moment or the detonant, no, what make this vasana sprout, no, open, you can feel something that it will happen in a few seconds.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's
develop
true
of our self-attentiveness, no?
Yeah,
With consequence.
yeah. That is, for a person whose mind is always going outwards, they won't be aware of the workings of vasanas because they're so caught up in the effects of the vasanas, in other words, their thoughts and desires and likes and dislikes and passions and so on. They are overlooking the seeds from which they arise. But the more we try to turn within, the more we will become aware of how our likes and dislikes, our desires and attachment, how they are sprouting from the subtle vasanas. And so the more we practice being self-attentive, the more we will be able to stop vasanas at the very moment they rise. In the 11th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, as long as Vishaya vasanas exist in the mind, so long is the investigation who am I necessary. As and when thoughts arise, then and there it is necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana in the very place from which they arise. Thoughts appearing is nothing but the sprouting of vasanas. So the implication here is, as soon as a vasana sprouts, we should destroy it then and there in the place from which it sprouts. We can do so only by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness. So we will become more skillful at crushing the vasanas at the moment they rise, to the extent to which we become skillful in holding on to self-attentiveness. That is, the more we are self-attentive, the more we will be aware, as you say, like the animals are aware of the earthquake or the tsunami even before it comes, or even before it's perceptible to our gross minds. They are more sensitive to these things, so they become aware of it at an earlier stage. There'll be subtle signs that they're able to recognize, but some danger is coming.
Mm-hmm. Can we put an example, Michael?
Yes.
I don't know if this is an accurate example, but it's my experience. I used to go to Ernesto before. You remember when we had our first meetings and online? So I used to go to Ernesto's because I didn't have a good connection and so on. So on my way home, on the way back home, I used to pass next to a pizzeria.
Yes.
And I like pizzas.
Yes.
So, without cheese.
So when I got in the car and I drove back home, sometimes for the thought of pizza, the pizzeria, I'm going to pass next to the pizzeria. So I knew that sometimes I knew that I was going to let myself be swayed by that vasana, even though 20 kilometers before arriving. I knew back at that moment, I knew, no, I cannot cut the vasana here now.
Yes.
And sometimes, as soon as I rose, I didn't pay attention to it. I forgot about it. And then I drove through the pizzeria and got home.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know if...
Yeah, but when you say you're not going to be able to resist it, what we actually mean when we say we can't resist this vasana is we don't want to resist it. It's because of a lack of will on our part to resist. We allow ourselves to be swayed by vasanas because we want to be swayed by them. So if we want to avoid being swayed by vasanas, we need to have so much love to attend to ourselves that we no longer want to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas.
Yeah, I knew it. It's true. Yeah. It's not that I felt compelled inevitably.
Yeah.
No, I said I want this time. I want this time. I knew that.
But the workings of desires and how they sprout from the vasanas and how the thoughts and everything sprouts from the vasanas becomes more and more clear to us the more we try to be self-attentive. That's why Bhagavan says it's necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana in the very place from which they rise. Then and there, apode kapode, that means at that very moment, in the very place from which they arise, it's necessary to annihilate them. We can annihilate them by vicharana only when we have gained that skill to detect the rising. As soon as it arises, let me not be swayed by it. If we don't have such if we are not so sensitive to the rising of vasanas, we'll be carried away by the vasana before we've even noticed it.
And Michael is very curious in this point, no? Sometimes when I usually read Nisargadatta, no, when I thought that is not a jnani, because sometimes he said that he takes the sword, no, to cut some desires. He said, ask to him, Nisargadatta, in your presence there is not more desires, and he said, I don't remember in what book, he said, no, I see, but with my sword immediately I cut this desire, I cut this, no, like this sprout of the vasanas, no, but that is what's happening is because there's not a jnani, because in a jnani there's not thoughts, there's not desires, and nothing to cut, no.
Yes. I mean, we don't know about his state, but that seems like the statement of someone who is still practicing, someone who still has vasanas. The definition of jnana is destruction of ego. And another term for destruction of ego is vasanakshaya. Vasanakshaya and manonasa, one and the same thing. Vasanakshaya means the eradication of all vasanas. Because how can there be vasanas? There can only be vasanas if there's an ego, because all vasanas are ego's vasanas. So in the state free of ego, it's also a state free of vasanas.
And images and
but so long as we rise as ego, we have vasanas, and therefore we need to cut them. What is the sword by which we cut them? Self-attentiveness. Only by holding on to self-attentiveness can we. That's why Bhagavan said it's necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana. That is, he says in Tamil. Ninivugal tondra, as and when the thoughts arise. Apode kapode means then and there, at that very moment. Avegele elam, all of them. Uppatistana tileye, in that very place from which they rise. Vicharanayal nasipika vendam. By vicharana, it's necessary to destroy them. So the only sword we have to cut all these vasanas, to cut all these desires, is the sword of vichara. That means self-attentiveness. So so long as vasanas are rising, yes, we need to wield that sword of self-attentiveness. It's for when we talk about wielding the sword, it is a metaphorical way of saying it. What actually in practice, what it means is we hold on to self-attentiveness and thereby don't allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana.
And when you said, Michael, at the beginning that if you are firmly established in self-attentiveness, you don't need to worry about your behavior. But wouldn't that be in practice? That's very hard. I mean,
yes, of course. For all that, so long as we are an abhyasi, so long as we are practicing, so long as the ego hasn't been annihilated, the vasanas will be constantly rising, like in countless numbers, like ocean waves, as Bhagavan says. That's the nature of ego, to have so many inclinations. So it will holding on to self-attentiveness requires effort so long as there's ego, because the very nature of ego is to go outwards. So when we are going inwards, we are swimming against the current. So the effort is necessary. So we will be constantly failing and constantly being swayed by our vasanas until the very end. That is, the extent to which we are swayed by our vasanas will be decreasing, but we will still be swayed by them to a greater or lesser extent until we eradicate the root, namely ego.
Yeah, the eradication of vasanas is not like a gradual, no, or I don't know if.
Well, it's a gradual weakening of the vasanas.
Exactly, but I mean that we don't know with what strength they're going to pop up again.
Oh no, exactly.
It
may seem to us sometimes, but we've got our mind well under control. Everything is checked. We are holding on to self-attentiveness.
Yeah,
and suddenly they arise with a fresh vigor, and our attention is dragged outwards.
Yeah, exactly. That you think that your vasana is you keep it under control. You're keeping it, but then boom.
Yeah.
with a strength that you
even the idea I'm now keeping my vasanas well under control. I'm not being swayed by them. That itself shows that we've been swayed, because thinking of anything other than I is being swayed by a Vishaya vasana.
And the effort is necessary, or is not. You can avoid the necessity of the effort. Meanwhile, this subside is not automatically. I said in certain levels, of the path, you try to restrain, and to attain, and this requires some kind of effort along certain levels, in the path, and afterwards that is not necessary, and automatically.
Bhagavan says effort is necessary till the very end. That is, he says, so long as Vishaya vasanas, in the first sentence of this 11th paragraph, so long as Vishaya vasanas exist in the mind, so long this investigation is necessary. What that implies is, so long as we've got an inclination to go outwards, we have to make an effort to hold on to the self-attentiveness and thereby not allow ourselves to be swayed. So the struggle continues to the very end.
But the sense of effort decrease, no?
Well, the effort doesn't decrease, but the feeling that it's an effort will decrease, because something seems to be an effort. If I ask you to do something that you don't want to do, it will seem to be a great effort to do it. Oh, I'm just doing it to please Michael. I don't really want to do it. It will seem like a big effort. If I ask you to do something you like to do, you won't feel it to be an effort because you like to do it. So the more we practice this, the more liking we will have to hold on to self-attentiveness, so the less it will seem like an effort. But it's still an effort, because the vasanas are still pulling us outwards. So to avoid being swayed by the vasanas, we need to make effort to hold on to self-attentiveness, because the natural flow of the mind is outwards. So we can't be inward except by effort until ego is destroyed. Then all effort comes to an end. Then effort is not necessary, because we are as we always are, and there's never anything that can touch us. But so long as there is ego, we have to make effort. We have to make effort to take refuge in the feet of the Lord. We have to hold fast to his feet. His feet is that which is shining in our heart as eye.
I feel that a good thing to remember talking about vasanas is what you said earlier, and also you wrote in your last article about vasana is just inclination. It doesn't mean that it's gonna carry you away. We have to remember that. Yes.
If we are carried away by our vasanas, we have no one to blame but ourselves.
Exactly.
Because there are inclination, because we want to be carried away by that inclination, we're carried away by it.
Yeah, because if we don't not aware of it, I mean, it's responsibility is not on our hands, and we're not going to do the job.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't need. Would you want to add anything else?
This is why in the 12th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan gives us so much assurance. He said, those who have fallen, like the prey that has fallen in the tiger cannot escape, those who have fallen in, who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will surely be saved and will never be forsaken. Eninum Guru Kartiya Varipari Tabaradu Narikavendum. However, or nevertheless, it is necessary unfailingly to follow the path shown by Guru. So we should never be complacent, because as soon as we become complacent, we'll be swept away by vasanas. So the effort to be self-attentive is necessary to the very end. Grace is doing everything that is necessary to help us, but we have to be willing to hold on to self-attentiveness. So our own effort is absolutely essential from moment to moment. Because if we slacken our effort for a moment, we are swept away by the Vishaya Vasanas, because that's the natural flow of the mind. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to swim against the current of a river, you can't relax for a moment. As soon as you relax, you get carried away by the current, and you have to again make the effort to get back there. So constant effort to be self-attentive is absolutely necessary.
And what Bhagavan said there, I don't know the exact words. Once you've been caught in the Guru's glance, it is like this, or
yes, yes.
Okay, that implies that you've been caught in his glance in this lifetime and the next lifetimes too.
He says, yeah, once you've been caught in the glance of Guru's grace, that is, once you've been attracted to Guru, once you feel Bhagavan is my Guru, mm-hmm. The path he has shown is the path I must follow. Once you have recognized him as your Guru, you have fallen, you've come unto us, you've fallen into the orbit of his, or you've come into the glance of his grace. And that once we have been taken by him, he is our Guru eternally till the end. I mean, not eternally, until the end of this ego. So yes, it will continue life to life.
Yeah.
But if we're wise, we'll cling to self-attentiveness so firmly, there'll be no more life. But most of us are not yet wise enough, so we have to struggle as long as we have to struggle. We don't know whether it'll be this lifetime or next lifetime or 10 lifetimes. Doesn't matter. The thing is, here and now, we need to be self-attentive. That's all we should be concerned about.
Yeah, we found our path, and we just have to say what he taught.
Yeah. There's no other way. There's no shortcut, because this is the direct path. If we feel inclined to take to any other path, we're just taking a roundabout way. Why not? Now we've been shown the direct way home. If we want to go home, we follow the direct way. We don't take any roundabout routes. If you take any roundabout routes, that means you're more interested in the journey than you are in reaching your destination. We're not interested in the journey. We're interested in who am I here and now.
That is the destination.
Yep.
Yeah.
I said in Guru Vachaka Kovai, when say that the path and the aim is the same.
Are the same. Yep. We are self of a path, and we are self of a goal.